Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I'm so happy to have my guest on again, who was here early on the podcast, a longtime friend, Wendy Sterling. Thank you so much for being here. It is so fun to have you on, and you and I spent the whole day together virtually as I was just on your podcast, and we've been talking and catching up in between. But really, how amazing to continue to have evolutions and iterations of our lives since we've known each other since college, and continue to show up in our personal and professional worlds as evidence of these evolutions and iterations. So with all of that, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Truly, it's such a joy to be here. And I know we spent the whole afternoon together. It's been so lovely.
It has. And yet there's still so much more to talk about, because the conversation we just had on your podcast is going to be similar and an entirely different conversation of what we're here for. So you have gone through a lot of transition over the past few years. Longer than that, that's culminated in some bigger stuff the past few years. And mazel tov and congratulations, because you turned all of this into an actual gift that you're giving the world, which is a book that you just wrote. Yes. Divorce Sucks, Now What?
Yes, my book, my crazy dream that bucket list, right? We were talking about bucket list items. This has been my bucket list item forever, and the time was right, and it was time to share my story. So yeah, it has been a journey, that's for sure.
So please share your journey. And there's so much within our journeys, right? Which part of the journey is most significant to you now? Because we've got here's my life story, but really, what's arising right now, and what is the significance of how I'm relating to what's arising? So whatever part resonates there with you.
Yeah, I have to say, I woke up about 6.5 years ago, and it was that night that I will never forget, where I realized that my husband of 15 years was having an affair. And it was a wake-up call that, none of us get married thinking divorce is ever on the table. I married my soulmate, and I was done, and this was my forever. And at the time, I didn't understand why me. I didn't understand, why this was happening to me. And yet over the course of the next couple of years, I completely understood why it was happening for me. And it really was because I had just completely lost my identity. And it started from when I was a little girl. I grew up in
as it normally does.
It just so happens that that's kind of what happens to most of us, right? My story being that I grew up in a family of Holocaust survivors. So my grandparents, were new to this country. My sister and I, first generation born here in the United States. And so everything was about fitting in and living as an American, even though we were immigrants. And so I very much was invited to live the typical female role: smile, sit, look pretty, obey, agree with what your elders are telling you. And when I was younger, that kind of wasn't who I was. My nickname growing up was Monkey for a reason, because I just was all over the place. I had different opinions. I was outspoken, and it got to the point where I started getting in trouble for it. And I saw myself shrinking as I was, basically being told to be somebody that they wanted me to be instead of authentically being who I was. And so that moment, 15 years into my marriage, was a wake-up call that that's exactly what I had done. I lived into the version of the woman and the mother and the wife that I was supposed to be. And so it helped me to really wake up and realize that it was time for me to figure out who I was through all these experiences and to really go on an exploration of what I liked. I mean, it was that simple. It was, what did I like? What did I want? Because everything in my mind was framed around my family. And eventually it was framed around my husband, and my dreams were his dreams. I didn't know what my dreams were. And so my journey through finding myself, that first year that we were separated, culminated in me deciding that I wanted a divorce, that I was no longer interested in continuing the life that we were in. And I was going to take a stand on my own. And ultimately that night, later that day that I asked for a divorce, I also discovered that my mom was rushed to the hospital and she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and didn't have a very long time ahead of her. And so here I was confronted with the two most important people in my life who were literally being taken from me. And instead of deciding to fall on the floor and crumble, and that's not to say that I didn't cry and I didn't, have moments. And I talk about in my book, about all of that and how, I actually thought that my mom's cancer diagnosis would wake my husband up and decide he wanted to stay married and tell me I was crazy wanting I had this whole story in my head.
Sure.
But what it ultimately did was it enabled my mom and I to really enter into a journey side by side of really discovering how strong we both truly were. And so my mom and I went through very similar metamorphoses together. Her going from a mindset of why me? Why am I the one, dying, to me going, why me? Why is my marriage dying? And both of us coming out on the other side, understanding that we were going through this to support one another. And ultimately, my mom is serving me in a higher way by being where she is. And so there was a moment where she realized that by surrendering to the inevitable, that it would still enable her and I to still have this connection and for her to still be here to support me. And so through our connection, I believe my mom and I have been connected in multiple lives. She's really been my sidekick in my recovery and my healing journey, all of which has brought me closer to my spirituality, has brought me closer to my faith, and, just understanding that everything that is happening for me. Yeah. And I know that we just talked about how, when we ask for like, okay, what's the lesson? What's the lesson? For me, it's really about it's okay, what's next? Because I always know that with everything that I go through, that there's something new that I'm not just only supposed to learn, but that it's okay, how do I teach this? So how am I become, essentially like I'm the butterfly that goes out and starts spreading the magic to the masses around what the message is supposed to be, because that's how my mother comes to me. That's how she gives me the messages. And then how I go out and I translate those messages to the masses to be able to really help people to see that there's so much more out there for us. There's such, we talk a lot about how, we get to vibrate at a higher frequency, how we get to step into who it is that we get to be. And many times we dumb ourselves down or we vibrate lower to match other people's. And so what I try to do and what I talk about in my book is ultimately how my mom showed me how to elevate and to be that source of inspiration. And irregardless of how other people see the situation or how they see you, you still get to shine your light and to stay at that higher place. And so here we are.
Wendy, thank you so much for sharing. I know it's still a raw and emotional topic, and it's so much more than a topic, right? It's the essence of your life force right now. And so just to vulnerably share all aspects of it, from your divorce to your mom's death, but really what you gained as a result. It's beautiful when we can have a reframe that serves us versus stay stuck in a lens that keeps us, whether in a victim or in grief or in the past. But there's a couple of things I want to ask about or go into deeper for people who are listening in different aspects of what you just shared. The first one that really hit me was your awareness that you stayed in the marriage of what was expected, perhaps, different generation. I mean, we know generationally that that was more appropriate just from our parents' generation, but also maybe perhaps culturally
Yes.
as immigrants. And I know so many of my clients, so many women feel like this is what it means to be a good mom. This is what it means to be a good wife. And we get stuck in this martyrdom and comparison to our mothers, previous generations. Do you think, or not do you think, what experience did you have in a felt sense of, I don't feel in alignment, but yet I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing by others' definitions? Because I think this is a piece in which many women don't know how to understand, access, harness, be aware of. They define it as something's wrong with me. I should be happier. Or kind of like Glennon Doyle in Untamed, like, isn't it supposed to be better than this?
Yeah.
Like, that's the inkling inside of us. Like, something is off, but I'm checking all the boxes. I'm doing all the right things. Like, why am I not fulfilled? Like,
right.
So did you have that inkling, even though you knew you were filling these roles? Because I think women need to hear this to give themselves permission to follow the inkling and say, wait, that's actually information you should be listening to.
Yeah, the way that I'll answer that is saying that I finally started seeing that I was constantly seeking external validation for my choices. And when I stopped having my source of validation, which was my husband, it was finally, like, when we had separated, it was kind of at that point where I realized that I had completely surrendered myself to being a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, as when I was married, it was like, oh, you talk to your husband about everything, right? And so instead of me taking a stand for, this is what I think, this is what I want, I'd be like, so what do you think about da 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 da, right? And it really, I started seeing how I was getting myself into this people pleasing, and it was like, oh, I'm getting the reaction, so I should feel that way. And then when I suddenly didn't have him around, it was like, okay, I don't even know what to see or to, I don't even know what to say or to think. And the first time that I had like a massive awareness smack upside the head was my parents came down to take me to dinner for my birthday. I live in LA, my family's up in the Bay Area, and they came down to LA for my birthday, and it was the year after we had separated, and they're like, we want to take you out to your favorite restaurant. Where do you want to go? And I started crying, and my mom was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I don't even know what my favorite restaurant is. I didn't have a favorite restaurant because I would always look to my husband to pick, right? Or I would go home with my family, and it's like, I didn't get to choose where we went to eat. We just always went to the same places that we did as a family. So it was one of those moments where I realized that I didn't have my own thoughts. I didn't have my own likes because I was constantly looking outside myself. And I'll never forget, just choosing that restaurant was such an eye-opening epiphany for me, where I was like, oh my God, this is like, I want to go to this. It wasn't the fanciest of places, right? Of course, with my husband, it was like, it had to be expensive. It had to be a steakhouse. It had to be this. It had to be that. And it's like, no, I just really want Italian. Like, I love Italian food. I just love Italian food. And that's what I wanted. And I picked an Italian place because there's a dish that I love, that I treat myself to. And like, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, this is what it feels like.
Yeah.
This is what it feels like to choose me.
And in another sense, when we are in those positions of people pleasing or external sources of validation, when we don't choose that, we are constantly self-abandoning.
Yes.
In favor of someone else's needs ahead of our own. And then we're told we're selfish for taking care of ourselves. So we get this fucked up message.
Yes.
And yet when we have the awareness of, wait, that's so fucked up, and actually self-abandoning is what the fucked up part there.
Right.
Not the choosing myself. It's such a powerful, simple, like, I got to choose my own restaurant. Do you know who Dr. Edith Eger is?
No, I don't.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
For all you guys
Okay.
listening, if you don't know, and Wendy, especially with the history of your family, Dr. Edith Eger is, I believe she's 94 years old at this point. She's an Auschwitz survivor.
Okay.
And in her 60s became a therapist. She lives in San Diego and she is still a therapist. And her first book came out when she was 92.
I love it.
And I want her to be my grandma. Like, she's on Instagram. She is the cutest thing in the whole world. And her book is called The Choice.
Okay.
That she realized after liberation from Auschwitz, she was still a prisoner, as many Holocaust survivors were, that once they were given freedom, they don't know what to do with it.
Right.
And many people turned back in and went back into the gates of Auschwitz once the gates were opened. And she was a prisoner of her victimhood until she decided to no longer be a prisoner of her victimhood. But on Passover, and for those who don't know, it's a very significant Jewish holiday in which traditionally we ask 4 questions. So she on Instagram on Passover last year posted a different kind of 4 questions that I use all the time for myself and I give to my clients as journal prompts. And it's so simple and yet so powerful. And and I've talked about it before on the podcast, but I want to bring it up again. So I have a question for you about this. Is the first question is, what do you want? Second question is, who wants it? Is it you or someone else who wants it for you? The third one is, what are you going to do about it? And the fourth one is when. And like, I use that as a journal prompt daily for months. And every day my answer was different. Like, it might not always be, I want Italian food tonight, right? Like, but my point is, for so many of my clients, when I ask the question of what do you want, that in and of itself stops them in their tracks, because they're like, I've never had the opportunity to consider what I wanted before.
Yeah.
And on your podcast, I just shared the story of breaking the board and the cushion. And I've talked about the board and the cushion on my show many times. And it's so interesting because for many people, the board represents our obstacles, the cushion is our dreams. For so many people, the board, but they don't know what the cushion is. The obstacle is, I don't know what I want. So once you figured out, as you went through this beginning of this metamorphosis, was it hard for you to continue to ask yourself the question, what do I want? Because many women are like, how do I even begin to go find out what I want? Like, that's such a huge black hole of an abyss of fear at 40 something years old. How do I even start that?
Yeah. What I paid attention to was the feeling in my body and where in my body that I felt what choosing me feels like. And that in and of itself is a very different feeling and place than when I was choosing things for my husband. And so I always talk about it's body over mind, because I really started paying attention to my body and to the physicality that I had when I was presented with these types of situations. So in order for me to really get to the root of what choosing me, what it was, like what it looked like when I was choosing me, it came down to my physicality. And I knew where in my body choosing me was, and it was in my heart. If it was in my gut or in my throat, it was external. But when it felt like heart aligned and warm and fuzzy, I knew that that was me. That was authentically me. And so then began this whole journey around, well, I want more of this, right?
I like the way that feels.
Like, wow, what is this, right? It's kind of like a new drug that you're like, ooh, I want to create more. And you brought this up as well. I treaded carefully around it, though, in the beginning, because I didn't understand what self-care was. I thought self-care was selfish. I was a, very career-driven working mom. I never took time to myself because, number one, I was waiting for my husband to tell me I could. I mean, literally, like, hey, Wendy, go take a break. Like, I was waiting for him to see that I needed a break instead of using my voice. And so that's what I ended up understanding, was that for me, self-care started with me learning what my voice sounded like. It wasn't about asking for, the act itself. For me, it was starting with, okay, now that I know what choosing me feels like, now what does choosing me sound like? So understanding,
I love that.
Thank you. Understanding the words and the language to communicate what choosing me sounds like, because I would make up stories in my head, expect my husband to read my mind because, duh, we've been together 2 decades. Why doesn't he know me by now, right? He's not a mind reader, never was, never has been, but yet I kept setting him up for failure because it's like, oh, this time he's going to read my mind. This time he's going to read my mind. And so
then I'll be happy and then I'll feel good is the next part of that.
Right. Yeah. I will be seen. I will feel heard. He loves me. Right. And so I had to start understanding how to use words coming out of my mouth to communicate in a way where I felt seen and heard. And so being able to do that enabled me to really start taking care of myself. And that then, dovetailed into, self-care gets to look like walking, like our break between podcasts, right? Like self-care was, you had to go feed yourself. I needed to go let my dog out and say hello to, my partner who just got back from work. And, and so self-care, I thought, had to be like an hour massage or getting my nails done. And don't get me wrong, absolute loving self-care, right? Lovely. But self-care gets to happen in these smaller increments. And I never understood that. And I never understood that I could ask for it. So that was a huge, huge epiphany for me. And I know that so many people can relate to this because so many times we think our words are being heard, but many times we're either not speaking them out loud or we're not using language where the other person is actually listening. They're hearing something different. So there's an art to the communication aspect that at 41 years old, I had to learn how to communicate.
Yeah. No one teaches us this stuff.
No.
It certainly wasn't role modeled from previous generations.
No.
And then we wonder, but I should know this. Yeah, says who? That's one of my favorite questions when we come up against should. Like, says who?
Yeah. I knew how to pick fights. I was really good at that.
Yeah.
Didn't get me anywhere. And, I have had this conversation with my ex-husband. We're very close now and, we co-parent beautifully with our 2 boys. And, we say we're better friends now than we were probably the last 5 years of our marriage. And, I'll never forget the day where I apologized to him. And I just said, I was like, I so clearly see how poorly I communicated. And I'm so sorry that it sounded like I was pointing my finger at you every single time. And I recognize that now. And I'm sorry. I just didn't have any other tools. Right. And not all of us can, it takes time to get to that place of forgiveness, but, he was born with his tools. I was born with my tools. And together it just got to the point where it wasn't working anymore. And a lot of times it takes these types of experiences, right? Like I called my divorce, it was like a whack upside the head with like a 2x4 piece of wood. It was like, boom, and my divorce was a gift. I am so grateful to have gone through what I did because I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be the happiest I've ever been. I wouldn't have the man in my life who I love and his kids and our kids and the family that we've created. And, I wouldn't have my business. I wouldn't have the clients. I love my life. And, it's funny, James actually also said something to me. We were talking, one day and, and I said to him, I was like, I'm like, aren't I I'm such a different person than when we were married. And he goes, yeah. And I was like, yeah, it really took our divorce for me to find myself. Right. And, when he said, he's like, yeah, but aren't you happy you did?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I am,
And I love that you name that, because I think for many people, these big, huge transitions feel like an ending point, which they are. And yet it's also an opening if we choose to embrace what the door is opening to.
Correct.
And it's not always easy to see that in the moment. And it might take a couple of years to even manifest and show you what that next piece is. And it's so funny you say that. I recently had a similar story with my ex. We were both in Israel while our daughter was there for the semester abroad. And there was a parent week. So, of course, we both went. And we get along so well that most of the other parents, I didn't realize we weren't married, because we were always together and talking and hanging out. And in fact, one time on the bus, on one of the day trips, we were catching up, and one of the other dads comes up to us and says, "Your divorce is inspiring to my marriage." It was hilarious, because he's like, "You guys talk." But yet we had these conversations. And at one point we were talking about who we were differently now in our 40s and divorce and in our separate lives and relationships and such. And we get so stuck in a certain role with a certain person from a certain point in time in which you connect. And it was this agreement of, we had to break up to grow up.
Yes.
And it was like so comforting to recognize, like, all of that, like, it had purpose. And it's a cliche, right? Taking the mess into your message and the chaos into your, like, and yet it's true when we choose to look through the lens that gives us that perspective that says, not only what am I here supposed to learn, but how can I apply what I've learned? And now, like, recognize I'm happiest because I actually know what happy means. It means that alignment of heart. It means choosing me or asking for self-care unapologetically.
Yeah. I love that. I love what you just said also, because like the level of awareness that you both have on the other side, right? Same thing with, me and my ex-husband, hindsight is 2020, right? And at the same time, I mean, I see him so differently, and yet I know he's still the same. I see that I'm the one that has changed. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say, and I'm not trying to say like he hasn't done any work or he hasn't done, I just mean like I can't vouch for what he has or hasn't done. I know what I've done. And I know that I'm different. And so how I show up in relation to him, right? It's like, I used to be the caterpillar and now I'm the butterfly. And so I'm just like light and I'm free and I'm flying around at this like, high vibration. And, and it's interesting because I notice with him too, that like, I notice that he is like, this is going to come off sounding strange, but I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like, I can tell that he is like attracted to the vibration that I'm at now. Not that he's attracted to me, but
right.
He wants to be up at this level now with me. And it's interesting because like I am an empath, so I have to be really careful with how I interact with certain people and not kind of take on other people's energies as well. And so, thankfully I've learned kind of how to keep my barriers, my boundaries up around that. But it's so interesting because I can sense how he like is wanting to be in that energetic space. Whereas when we were going through our divorce, like he wanted nothing to do with me, right? Because I was so low vibe. Like I was angry, I was depressed, I was anxious, I was bitter, I was resentful towards him, and he wanted nothing to do with me. Right? Rightfully so. I mean, who wants to be around that all the time, right? And yet with where I'm at now, right? Gratitude, generosity, kindness, love, caring, inspiration, creativity. I'm up at this higher level now where he's like, yeah, I want to be around, like, I don't mind being around you now. Right?
Wendy, I haven't seen you in person in many years, and I feel your lightness as a shift. And you came on retreat with me, I guess it must have been 2019.
Yes.
And I remember, and I don't think this is exactly in alignment with what you're talking about. So
share.
I don't think it's disclosing anything. It's more of an observation and of your growth. I remember sitting across the dinner table from you at one night, and you were pretty angry still. And I remember saying to you, Wendy, one day you're not going to be so angry. And you were so attached to that anger. You're like, nope, never. He's an asshole. He's a whatever, blah, 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 blah. And I like, why would I ever not be angry? And I remember saying something to the effect of like, one day you're going to decide it's not going to serve you to stay angry. And you weren't there yet. And that was totally fine because that's the stage you were in. But like,
Right.
it's so beautiful to literally see this metamorphosis, this transition, this evolution. And I think it's also easy to remember and helpful to remind others, it's okay if you're still stuck there.
Yeah.
It will pass if you want it to, if you have the support team to help you, whether it's a therapist, could just be a really helpful friend. Oftentimes my best friend is a lot better than my therapist and she's a hell of a lot cheaper. So it doesn't always have to be, but like make sure it's the right people who are supporting you in the right message, not just the ones who will hear you gripe and complain and jump on the bandwagon to keep you at that low vibration.
Yeah. And I'll say, like, I remember all of that. And that was the year I got hit with engagement. Our divorce wasn't even finalized. They conceived a child, got married, moved into, it was like, I was in this storm and, and I remember the epiphany that I had shortly thereafter had to do with like, he moved on years before I even got the clue that our marriage was done. Right. So of course he was in this place in 2019, right? Because he had moved on like 5 years before, like he was already done with me. Right. Yeah. And so, I say that because again, it's about you shifting, right? It's not that he's different. It's not that he's doing something different. It's that my lens has totally changed around how I saw him. Mm-hmm. And, and again, also seeing him as like, he has his toolkit. That's it. He doesn't have mine. And I keep adding to it. I don't know what he's doing and it doesn't matter. And so it doesn't, it's always an evolution. And I'll also say this too, like, he still pisses me off, right? Like, he's always going to be in my life. We're never going to see eye to eye. We never did when we were married. We're not going to now. And our kids are 16 and 13 now. And so we still have a lot of decisions and a lot of family time ahead of us. But I will tell you that the interactions are what's different. He may piss me off, but I don't go into reactive volcano mode with him. It's like, oh, there he goes again. Okay. Yeah. So how do I, how do I get through to him this time? Right. And so again, like, it's an evolution. The relationship is an evolution, but it's all rooted in you choosing to shift and you seeing how you shifting, you get to change what that relationship looks like, very much like how, you and your ex were able to do it. We got the same thing. People didn't know that we were divorced still. When we were together at one of our kids' soccer events, it was really humorous. We both just kind of chuckled about it afterwards, but like, it's a testament to the work that you've done. And, it's kind of awesome, actually.
It is kind of awesome. So in your book, how do you guide the reader to be able to harness your own awareness to actively create the shifts? Because I'm sure you talk about that there as part of your journey. So what are some of the things, like, tangibly, someone who's listening is like, okay, all this sounds great conceptually, but like, what do I do right now?
Yeah. So the book kind of takes you through what I call kind of like your first step in the recovery and healing process, which is really around finding yourself. And it's my Rehab acronym, right? So it's really about rediscovering, reclaiming your identity and voice, and doing so by learning what your values are and setting boundaries based on those values. So that was a big part, as I was saying before, of like the self-care piece, right? Understanding and learning what my voice sounded like and distinguishing it from him. From there, we move into the E, which is all about ending your pity party, right? Ending your victim mindset. So how do we do that? Well, we learn to distinguish our ego and our inner critics from what our truth and our higher self voice sounds like. And that comes from really leaning into the process of self-love and figuring out what your true inner wisdom is versus what your fear is speaking to you. And then the H is about healing your wounds. So how do you do that? Well, you're healing a lot of pieces. It's not just your marriage falling apart, right? For me, it was mourning the loss of my best friend, my soulmate, the dreams that we had, the long-term financial security that we had created for ourselves. Potentially I thought I was going to have to sell my house. The family, the vacations, our son's bar mitzvahs, it was like one on top of the other. So the healing the wounds part is really around stepping out of the fear and moving into the self-love piece, right? So embracing that, yes, those have now shifted, but you get to create new ones. So really shifting your mindset from the dark, which is fear, into the light, which is love. And doing so by moving into the A, which is all around accountability and acceptance. And so how you do that is really understanding the difference between self-worth, self-esteem, and confidence. And so taking responsibility for who it is that you allowed yourself to become, right? Embracing the old parts of you and figuring out who and what you do or don't want to bring with you, right? And not allowing your past to define who it is that you are today and who it is that you get to be. And to really start stepping into a place of ownership. If you can't take responsibility and hold yourself accountable for how you showed up in your marriage, then you're not going to be able to move forward. Marriage takes two people. Okay. You have to own 100% of your 50. You do not own any part of their 50%, but you have to own yours, right? So I had to own how I showed up, how I was a poor communicator, how I picked fights to get attention, how I, treated him, and how I didn't prioritize our relationship, how I didn't see it separate from the family, right? So until I was able to say, oh God, I did all those things, how are you going to move on? And accept that, yes, you did that, but it doesn't define you. And it doesn't mean that that's who you're going to be moving forward. So I teach the steps in the book around how it is that I moved through that. And then finally moving into the B part, which is really building that foundation by which you get to create your life. And to me, the foundation is forgiveness, self-forgiveness. And so I spend a lot of time talking about compassionate self-forgiveness. I know you talk a lot about self-compassion. For me, I see that rooted in and a part of the forgiveness process. So for me, I see forgiveness as the ticket to elevate your frequency, to vibrate higher. I call it the frequency of forgiveness. And through the frequency of forgiveness, that is how you create abundance. That is how you create and build the life of your dreams, the life that you want. Because once you're at forgiveness, anything is possible.
Yeah. I love that so much. It's such a beautiful framework, and I think can be applied to so many different areas of stuckedness that people find themselves in. And it doesn't have to be that big of a life transition to recognize that you can make a change. I mean, even so many of the women I work with are shifting their identities from being mothers of high school children to transitioning into mothers of college age children. And how does my identity change? Or even if it's like from infant and babyhood into kindergarten, like our identities as women go through so many iterations and transitions, and we don't always catch up with the times.
Yeah. I'm going to throw another identity in there that maybe some of your listeners also have to get used to, which is also when your ex has another child with their new wife, right? And figuring out, well, I was going to be the only one, right? I was going to be the only mom to his parent, to his offspring, right? And now all of a sudden my kids have a half sister. And that was an identity crisis, right?
I bet.
And another piece too was like when my mom died, right? Like my identity as a daughter. I have my dad. I have a very different relationship with my father than I did with my mother. And I'm now having to figure out how to be a daughter to my dad, because I am realizing I was a daughter through my mom to my dad. And so now I'm trying to create a relationship with my father after, I'm 46. And so I think that there's this you're in a like in all areas of your life, you're in a constant like figuring out who the hell I am.
Yeah.
But the difference is that it's not that I'm trying to shift to be somebody else in relation. It's how is it that who I am today, how does who I am today fit in a relationship with my dad? How does me being who I am today fit in a spiritual relationship with my mom? Right? How do I fit into a relationship with my kid's half sister who is 3 and like probably doesn't even comprehend how her and my boys have different moms, right? They have the same dad, right? And so we're in this, I feel like we're in an always evolution of, being, but it's not changing the being, it's standing in the being and, figuring out, okay, how does that work? I shifted myself for other people. And now I don't do that anymore. I show up as me and try to figure out, okay, how does me navigate this new life transition?
Yeah. And you can still be you and show up differently in all those relationships as long as it's in alignment with that relationship and you. Because I think other people get confused on that too of,
yes,
but I can't be the same person with everyone. And that's fine. You're not going to be.
Correct.
But yet when you are aligned with your own heart center and your values, it informs you what would be aligned and authentic in this relationship in this moment in time, because it might change again.
Correct. Yeah.
Again, like I always say, easier said than done, but this is the journey. This is the gift of the journey.
It is. And your values are your check, right? That's how you go back and check, like, am I being authentic? Am I in alignment with being Wendy? Like, I didn't know who the hell being Wendy was. I knew what everyone saw me to be. And so then I was like trying to be her and like, be like, yeah, check okay, good. I'm being the Wendy that everybody wants me to be. And now I do it unapologetically. And either you can take it or you can leave it. I'm just in a place now where I don't care. I just don't care if you don't like me. That's totally fine. I don't take it personal. I used to take it personally. And then I would, backstep and flip myself upside down to want to be liked.
That was the people pleaser.
Yeah. And
the
now
recovering people pleaser.
Yes, I am. But, I have this attitude now. And, and one of the things I do want to throw out, because we were talking about this too before we hit record, is like the ripple effect for how we've shifted is seeing our kids, right? And seeing the power that we have to end the cycle, to start a new cycle, to instill a newness that our kids get to bring forward and to not have to go through, right? A lot of what our families pass down to us, we have the power now to shift how our kids, get to move through this world. And to me, that's where my power, that's what keeps me motivated. That's what keeps me wanting to do this work and to teach my kids, because that ripple effect is so powerful and shows me that, it's like, I've done it. Like I've done a good job. And I believed that before. I wanted to believe it. And I believed it when people told me or complimented my kids. But now, like, I just see who they get to be in this world. And I'm like, yeah, that's because of me.
Yeah.
Right. And it feels so good because that's a product of the work we've done.
Yes.
And our kids have paid attention.
They are always paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wendy, how can people find your book? How can they find you if they want to learn more?
Yeah. So, well, my book is on Amazon and you can get it as a paperback or as a Kindle version. And it's called Divorce Sucks Now What? So just, search it in Amazon. You can also go to my website, divorcesucksnowwhat.com. And you can get the book from there. I also have amazing downloadable free resources that actually tackle every aspect of the 5 steps that I talked through. So you can go on that website to check that out. If you guys follow me on social media, it's Divorce Rehab with Wendy is my handle across everything. I also have my own podcast, which Jory is going to be on again, which is called the Divorce Woman's Guide podcast. And that's on every single platform. So that's how
Amazing.
everyone can find me. Thank you.
Amazing, Wendy. It's so fun to witness and observe from both a close and far vantage point your own journey and evolution. And it's for all you listening out there who are like, oh, I wish that could be me. I'm still stuck in that first, place of showing up of how others want me to be and self-abandoning and people pleasing. And every moment of every day is an opportunity to show up in a space of more alignment. Like it doesn't have to be these big, massive changes overnight. Like even just these small little awarenesses can sometimes almost be enough. So for all you listening, it doesn't mean you have to go get divorced. It doesn't mean you need to have the death of a parent for you to find your own metamorphosis and transition into more aligned, authentic, fulfilling, happy, joyful. Like put all the other words that we want in there. Like you don't have to wait for that to be the catalyst. And thank you so much for sharing your journey.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. And I just adore you. And thank you for the work that you do in this world as well. It's equally important. So,
well, we'll have you on the next couple of years. We can both talk about our next iterations.
I know. I can't wait. I love that we're following each other on this journey.
I love it too. I love it too. And to all of those of you who are listening, if this spoke to you, resonated, please share this episode. I think there's so much wisdom in here that especially women, I know men need to change too. Their language might sound different, but for women who are feeling really stuck and don't necessarily know the pathway to more aligned, fulfilling, abundant living, it's possible. It's definitely possible. So thanks so much, you guys, for sharing and for tuning in today. I hope you all take care and be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat, visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.